Hola amigos y clientes de JLW Immigration Law Group. Soy Jennifer Walker Gates, abogada de inmigración. Estoy aquí el 6 de noviembre del 2024, el día después de la elección presidencial en los Estados Unidos, que anticipamos que nos va a afectar mucho durante los próximos 4 años. Vamos a estar hablando hoy de las probabilidades basados en lo que habíamos visto anteriormente con la administración de Trump anterior, que podemos anticipar en los años que vienen. No voy a mentir, estoy súper triste hoy, con mi corazón realmente rota, porque lo que vimos anteriormente de la administración de Trump era súper difícil, súper anti-inmigrante y con muchas personas viviendo con mucho miedo. Voy a hacer este informe hoy en español, pero también si tienen preguntas en inglés, por favor, ponlas. If you have questions in English, I will also respond to those. So please don't hesitate to list those. Primero, voy a hablar de unas cositas importantes, administrativas. Por favor, suscribe a nuestro canal de YouTube. Especialmente ahora va a ser súper importante tener fuentes de información correctas y no súper emocionales. Es decir, que las medias normales están siempre compartiendo cosas para agarrar sus ojos, para agarrar su atención, jalar su atención y no necesariamente para informarle de qué hacer exactamente para protegerse. Entonces, por favor, suscríbase. Nosotros vamos a estar así comprometidos en proteger a nuestros clientes, a nuestras comunidades. Nunca vamos a dejar de compartir información para protegerse a ustedes, a sus familias, a sus seres queridos, a sus vidas en los Estados Unidos. Lo que habíamos visto en la administración anterior de Trump era realmente mucha más detención. Ahorita bajo la administración del presidente Biden, las personas deportadas han estado las que se involucraron en problemas criminales. Los han descubierto en las cárceles. Y si no han tenido problemas muy serios, como cargos criminales muy, muy malos, muy serios, muy graves, los han estado soltando en los Estados Unidos sin deportarlos. Bajo administración de Trump no va a ser así. Va a ser importantísimo evitar problemas con la ley. Porque cualquier persona que fue agarrada fue sujeto a deportación. Si las personas han tenido ya una orden de deportación, bajo esta administración han estado muchas veces sueltos todavía en los Estados Unidos y tenían familiares, hijos, vidas en los Estados Unidos y no eran riesgosos para la seguridad de la comunidad. Bajo Trump no era así. Era mucho más riesgoso para cualquier persona sin la ciudadanía estar viviendo en los Estados Unidos. Entonces, vamos a estar en las semanas que vienen preparándonos. Vamos a estar hablando de cómo prepararnos. Hoy estoy demasiado triste realmente para hacer estrategias muy buenas, muy completas, pero en las semanas que vienen, eso sí va a ser el enfoque. ¿Cómo podemos prepararnos lo mejor posible para lo que va a pasar durante los próximos 4 años. Ok, ahorita tenemos muchas preguntas, so voy a estar respondiendo lo mejor que puedo a sus preguntas ahorita, cada uno por cada una. Ok, Mike Snuffer Report. Interesting. I want to check out your channel, Mike Snuffer Reports. I was wondering if you think CR1 will be impacted under Trump. Okay. CR1, for anyone who doesn't know, CR1 is a category of residency that is available to newlyweds of U.S. citizens. So people who get married to a U.S. citizen and then apply for their residency, but they haven't been married for 2 years or more when the residency is approved, they get a category of residency called CR1 that stands for conditional residency. So it's not quite permanent residency, it's like permanent residency with conditions. And that is a 2-year status. And what happens at the end of that 2 years is you have to file some more paperwork to show that you have a bona fide marriage, that you have a real marriage, and that your green card or residency should be approved without conditions, and that they should remove the conditions and give you the permanent resident status. So, Mike, it's really hard to say. We don't have a crystal ball. We do not know what they will do. What I can tell you is what we saw before during the prior Trump administration, and that was that all permanent residency cases were impacted to a certain extent. The main way that the permanent resident process was impacted before for spouses of U.S. citizens, spouses of lawful permanent residents, parents of U.S. citizens in particular were impacted in this way. They were impacted through the financial requirements, the public charge requirement for immigration. Now, in the end, the reality of that situation was that most of the people who qualify for under the public charge requirements now will also qualify if those same ones are brought back. But there was a lot of fear ginned up about the public charge requirements and a lot of confusion. The Trump administration previously did try to make the public charge requirements much harder to comply with in terms of the documentation requirements. They tried to make the income requirements harder. Lawsuits ended up blocking all of that. And like I said, the truth was that in the end, the use of public benefits by immigrants in the United States is already extremely limited. There is very little in the way of federal aid or money or assistance that's available to somebody who doesn't have their permanent resident status already or their citizenship already. So most people hadn't used federal public benefits that were going to disqualify them under those public charge rules. And so, but there was so much confusion and fear. A lot of people got really intimidated, and the documentation requirements for complying with public charge rules under that administration were very onerous. I expect that will be brought back. I think in that way, CR1 will be impacted, as well as potentially all the other permanent resident applicants. But ultimately, hopefully, we won't see actually people really being denied on that basis, hopefully. We will be prepared for that. And I think we got a pretty good sense before of what is likely to happen, but we don't have a crystal ball. We can't say for sure yet. So thank you for that question. Okay, next question is Jose. ¿Qué ha pasado en la audiencia del Parole para esposos? Muy buena pregunta. La verdad es que todavía no sé. No han publicado mucha información. Debido a que la audiencia pasó el mismo día que la elección, puede ser, me imagino, unos días hasta que nos dan una actualización del proceso. La verdad es que no anticipo que el parole in place últimamente va a seguir bajo la administración de Trump. pienso que él probablemente va a cancelar ese proceso, esa posibilidad, ese programa. No tengo, otra vez, no puedo ver el futuro, desafortunadamente, me encantaría poder hacerlo. No puedo decir con 100% certitud, pero debido a lo que habíamos visto anteriormente, que el presidente Trump anteriormente trató de cancelar muchos programas humanitarios, incluso DACA, incluso TPS, puso restricción en permisos para viajar para personas con DACA, y la única razón de que no pudo fue por demandas en las cortes. Entonces, vamos a tener que ver, pero yo anticipo que él probablemente cancelará el programa de Parole in Place para esposos, lastimablemente. Okay, Anthony, I have a PIP case with your office. Hi. Do you think this will be canceled this Friday, now that we all know and the judge knows that Trump is the president? That is a really good question, Anthony. There's actually an article. Let's see if I can find that Boundless article. Boundless.com is a service that helps people who are going through immigration processes without an attorney. And it's a really good service. They cannot provide the same kind of individualized, specific assistance that a private attorney can, or even a nonprofit attorney, someone who's representing you directly. However, in terms of the resources they provide to the community who is going through the process by themselves, I think they're excellent. I have just posted a link in this chat to an article that they published about the Parole in Place program for families that I found to be very simple, very well organized, very clear. That are likely, and they're talking about the fact that even if the judge lifts the stay on the program and says, okay, this program can go forward, whoever loses in this lawsuit is probably likely to appeal, and it could be another several months at the appellate level. Then that could go up to the Supreme Court, which, now that Trump is in office, I don't think his Department of Justice is going to be taking up this case and pushing it up to the Supreme Court. So what the trial judge does, remember, there are multiple levels of courts that have to sign off on things in the United States. And since Congress has been so dysfunctional in passing laws for the past several decades, the courts have been the place where these kinds of programs get fought out. And it's really not ideal. It wasn't how our legal system was supposed to work. And so we see so much confusion and back and forth, and like it's starting and it's stopping and it's starting and it's stopping. So no matter what the judge does at the trial level, the appellate court could do something else, and the Supreme Court could do something else. The Trump administration is now going to take over the defense of the program that the Biden administration has been carrying. They'll probably not defend it. So I am not sure. I wish I had a different report for you today, but I honestly don't have much hope for the Parole in Place program at this point. I hope I'm wrong about that. I hope what happens is that the court lifts the stay, and then it doesn't get appealed, and people can just apply and get approved. But that isn't the reality that we're living in right now. The reality that we're living in is one where people in the United States have been told that our country is being ruined by immigrants instead of uplifted by immigrants, instead of created and built and strengthened by immigrants, which is what I believe. And because that's the case, many Americans who have the right to vote have voted out of fear for somebody who has promised to get immigrants out of the United States, to restrict the number of people who can get legal status in the United States. And unfortunately, I think that's what we're most likely to see more of over the next several years. There will be ways, there will be people who can still get legal status. There will be ways to deal with this and still move forward in the system. I am sure about that. I am not giving up. We are going to find ways through, but it's not going to be as clear, as easy, and there won't be as many opportunities as we have seen under the Biden administration. I really regret that the Biden administration didn't introduce this program in its first year in office instead of at the very end of its term. Really, really sorry about that. But this is the reality that we're dealing with at this moment, unfortunately. Thank you for your question. Okay, Adney, hi, it's good to see you again. I-130 petition for alien relative. Estimate time shows your case longer than expected, except you. Process will be notified. Okay. Adney, I think what you're saying is that your I-130 is still pending. You would hope it would be decided by now, but it hasn't been decided yet. And the process is taking longer than expected. And that's probably what the message is on the USCIS website, is that the process is taking longer than expected. Nothing is needed, but they'll let you know if something changes. This is normal. Processing times change as new programs come into place and old ones go out. Processing times for different types of cases can get longer and shorter, faster and slower, and it's very frustrating. But at this point, it seems like your case is filed properly, processing and moving forward as it should be, even though immigration is taking longer than you had hoped. So I don't think there's anything to do. I think it's okay, except you just have to keep waiting, which is really hard and very frustrating. But hopefully your I-130 will be approved just like it's supposed to be. So let's see who's next. Nereida Borges. ¿Qué ha pasado con el parole humanitario que no han dado más permisos de viaje a las personas que están en espera desde su aprobación desde el 23 de julio? Me aprobaron y nada. Parole humanitario. Ok. Está hablando, me imagino, del programa de parole para personas de Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua y Cuba. Y creo que Haití. No sé tampoco qué va a pasar con eso, aunque anticipo que la administración de Trump probablemente cancelará ese programa también. Han estado pues esperando muchos meses para invitar a personas que hayan recibido ya su aprobación para el programa y las invitaciones simplemente no les han mandado. No sé qué va a pasar si los van a mandar ya durante los últimos 2 meses de la administración del Biden o qué va a pasar si el programa está como abandonado con el próximo presidente. Ojalá que esas personas puedan todavía entrar con su invitación bien, pero desafortunadamente no lo puedo garantizar. No sé todavía qué va a pasar. Es una frustración, pero es otro problema que hemos visto, Nereida, con la manera de que ha estado funcionando nuestro gobierno para mucho tiempo, que el Congreso no está reformando la ley, entonces el presidente está tratando de hacer programas y las cortes resolviendo desacuerdos sobre los programas y debido a que han creado los programas los presidentes y no el Congreso, las personas que supuestamente son beneficiarios no tienen muchos derechos bajo la ley porque no es la ley normal escrita por el Congreso. El Congreso debe ser el cuerpo del gobierno dando derechos a personas para entrar, no el presidente. Porque cuando el Congreso lo hace, la persona, el beneficiario, tiene más derechos. So, en este momento, ese programa del Parole es algo sumamente discrecionario. El servicio de migración puede hacer lo que ellos quieren con el programa y porque no han invertido dinero, no han invertido en el gobierno, en el proceso, no tienen ellos obligación realmente de hacer una decisión, hacer la indicación final. Espero que tiene sentido mi respuesta. Yo sé que es muy confuso el sistema de migración en los Estados Unidos, pero lo que le puedo decir es que ahorita no sabemos, vamos a tener que ver qué pasa. Green Thumb Girl, good morning. I'm glad to see you. It is a tough morning for those of us who love immigrants. We are sad this morning, but I'm glad to see you here. Anthony is with his second question. Can I use the biometrics from I-131F toward the VAWA? Ooh, that's a good question. I'm not sure if they would do that. So with the biometrics is anytime someone submits the biometrics, they're capturing them and then reusing them for subsequent processes in most cases. Sometimes we have seen that they are calling people back in for new biometrics. That can happen for any number of reasons. It could happen in a case like the one you're describing because it could be that the VAWA case requires a new set of biometrics if the I-131F process is canceled, for example. Regardless, the biometrics requirements are a pretty simple part of the process to comply with. You just show up, let them take your fingerprints, let them take your photograph. We don't even go with clients to the biometrics appointments because they're typically very smooth, very quick, very easy, and very low risk. So hopefully, regardless of whether biometrics are taken for a VAWA case or not, that can be something that could be possible and relatively simple to comply with and not create an impediment for your case. And, if you have additional questions about that, just let us know. But hopefully the biometrics portion of the case is one of the easier parts to deal with. And thank you so much for that second question. Bonnie San Miguel says, how long do you think it will take for Judge Barker to make a decision? Or is there a time frame for a decision? Well, there's no real time frame for a decision. However, the stay is set to expire on the 8th of this month, which would be Friday. The stay right now is in place, the stay on the PIP program, where adjudications could continue if the stay is lifted or expires without the judge taking additional action. I would expect the judge to either issue a decision before Friday or extend the stay until such time as he has time to write and issue his decision. I think that's probably what's likely to happen. But again, I'm terrible at predicting the future. So maybe I will be wrong. We'll just have to see. Let's see who's next. Ophelia. What if we apply for parole in place now before the year ends? Do you think it can still be approved, being that it was submitted before Trump takes office, or it won't matter because he'll cancel the program? Yeah, so there are several different parts and pieces kind of overlapping here, Ophelia. We have, Trump about to take office in January, and then the PIP program, you can submit it here. But if the stay doesn't get lifted, if the fight in the court continues and then Trump takes office and then just cancels the whole thing, then it just goes away, right? Right now, if it were me, I don't know that I would spend the money to apply for the program because I just don't think it has a lot of hope for long-term survival. Now, I am very still bruised from the last Trump administration and from, all of the different types of programs that were canceled under that administration. I could be wrong. It could be that under this administration, Trump takes a different tack than he has promised. Everyone knows that he says stuff all the time that then it turns out not to be true. Or, he just says all kinds of crazy stuff and, that he's going to do X, Y, and Z, and then he does A, B, and C instead. So we'll see. Maybe he will leave it in place, but only if it seems advantageous to him. That's one thing that we can see very clearly about Donald Trump, is that he appreciates things that benefit him and his position of power. So if he, for some reason, perceives that the PIP program would be good for him in some way, maybe he'll leave it in place. Otherwise, I think he's going to cancel it. Jessica, any positive words about consular processing at this time? Waiting for 601A since November of 2022. In process for 4 years. I'm just so scared. Yeah. I don't blame you for being scared. I-601A since November of 22. One positive thing I can say is that we have been seeing processing of those processing times improving. They're down from like 4 years to about 2.5. So I don't know that your 601A would be approved before Trump takes office unless there's a big surge of approvals during the last couple of months of Joe Biden's term. I hope that that's what they will do, is really send resources to get as many of those cases approved as possible. However, the long-term outlook for consular processing, based on what I saw before, again, I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but I can tell you what we saw before was that consular processing still worked under the Trump administration. We still had dozens, if not hundreds, of clients approved for their residency through consular processing throughout the Trump administration. We did also see clients hassled a little bit more. We did also see requirements for documents and evidence increased and made more stringent. We saw a constant barrage of changes and threatened changes and lawsuits in response. And it was a lot to keep up with. It was a lot of work to understand and comply. It was more expensive for our clients because our workload increased so much. We try really hard to maintain an affordable approach for our clients. And it is very hard to run a business as an immigration attorney under an administration like that, because you set a certain price, you think it's going to be a certain way, and then it totally changes. Not the client's fault, not our fault. And then trying to kind of negotiate how we can work together to make sure that like our bills get paid, our staff gets paid, and your case gets done thoroughly and with as much strength and winnability as possible. Very tough, but not impossible. And we are not giving up. We are going to keep fighting. We are going to keep working hard to understand how to get through this. And the thing is that in the United States, there are a massive number of people leaving the workforce every day because most of our population is getting older. Large numbers of people who are retiring all the time. We need immigrants in the United States to keep our economic engine going. Donald Trump knows this as well as anyone. And so they are not going to stop allowing people to become residents. They're not going to stop allowing people completely to work in the United States. But Donald Trump likes to use immigrants to strengthen his position of power. He likes to make people scared, and that will not stop. I personally am going to stop watching the news for a while, except for what comes through very specific, reliable, trustworthy sources into my email inbox. So that is how I will curate my news feed for the foreseeable future, because getting freaked out and scared and catastrophizing about the headlines is not helpful. We have to be very strategic and get ready to plan and prepare and get better as attorneys and as advocates for ourselves and our families. But they're not going to stop admitting people. Consular processing, if the next term is like the last, consular processing will still work. Waivers will still get approved. It is potentially not going to be as easy. They may mess with some of the ways that things work, but they also know that immigrants are needed if our economy is going to continue to thrive. And so they will play it both ways, where they'll try to make people scared about immigrants, but they'll still also allow them to come into the US and get, I'm certain of that. Okay. What do you think can happen? Let's see, Daniel Villanueva. What do you think can happen with those of us that are planning on attending the consular interview in our country of origin? Yes. Okay. So we have to keep a very close eye on those changes, Daniel, because we will want to be very clear that the process continues to work the same way, or that we are very clear about what exactly the new requirements are as new requirements come online. Now, most times when new requirements are put into place, they don't necessarily apply to cases that are already filed and in process. Most times they apply to processes moving forward. We're just going to have to be very aware and very clear and make sure that our information is complete, correct, and that we're documenting our cases better than ever and providing very clear instructions and summaries and overviews to consular officers. That is how we handled it before. That is what we will do again. It's, forces us as attorneys to get much better organized, much clearer about eligibility requirements. And that's what we're going to have to do again. I will not be personally sending any client to their consular appointment under the Trump administration without being very, very clear that we've met all the requirements as written, as explained, as published, and that the client meets all of those requirements. If we have to tell clients, don't go, wait, we'll do that. If the client wants to be, certain that they can stay in the US, right? There's going to be some worst case scenario planning that needs to happen for a lot of people. One of those situations might be, I go to my consular interview and I'm not approved. Now is the time to start kind of thinking through those scenarios while we're calm, relatively calm and safe. We don't want to try to make those plans when the crisis actually occurs. We want to have that planned out ahead of time. So that is another aspect, in addition to really, studying and staying on top of the constant changes. We're going to need to do some worst case scenario planning as well. So we will be tackling things both ways. I wish that weren't the case. That is the reality that we're dealing with. Okay, Violeta. Hola, abogada. Sí, tengo DACA. Aplico a lotería de visas. Tengo que salir del US para recibir la green card si la gano. Violeta, la lotería de visas y DACA, no estoy 100% segura cómo, o si legalmente van juntos. Porque lotería de visas requiere que una persona no tendrá estatus sin permiso, y DACA requiere que una persona tenga estatus sin permiso. Entonces yo veo un conflicto entre esas categorías de estatus. Recomiendo que consulte con un abogado de confianza antes de que vaya a cualquier consulado, para estar segura que realmente va a ser elegible si gana la lotería de visas. Normalmente la lotería solo existe para personas afuera de los Estados Unidos o las personas que han estado siempre con estatus legal dentro de los Estados Unidos. So, va a ser importante aclarar esa duda que yo tengo antes de que vaya a su cita. Ok, próxima pregunta es Freddy. Hola, abogada. ¿Qué pasará con las personas que ya ganaron cancelación de deportación? Ok, Freddy, muy buena pregunta. Esas personas que están esperando su oportunidad de recibir la residencia a través de su aprobación de cancelación de deportación, me imagino que realmente no van a ser impactados tanto porque esas personas han aplicado y recibido un beneficio escrito en el Código de Leyes de Migración por el Congreso desde hace mucho tiempo. Desde hace el año 1996 han tenido esa categoría de residencias y el presidente, según el sistema de leyes en los Estados Unidos, no puede simplemente cambiar algo que fue escrito por el Congreso. Yo imagino que van a tener que seguir esperando porque hay un límite muy severo dentro de la ley de 4,000 personas anualmente y hay muchas más personas que eso que califican para ese programa. Hay que esperar varios años hasta que está disponible su visa, pero yo imagino que esas personas que ya hayan ganado su cancelación de deportación todavía van a recibir su residencia a pesar del cambio de presidente. Otra vez no puedo garantizar, quién sabe qué va a tratar de hacer, pero si él intenta hacer algo, va a tener que ganar una demanda, otra demanda para poder hacer cualquier cosa en contra de cancelación de deportación, porque eso es algo escrito por el Congreso. Okay, let's see. Can the new office get rid of the VAWA program? Okay, really good question too, Wendy. This is another area where VAWA is something that was written by Congress and published into law by Congress, by the president. What the president could try to do is potentially change some of the requirements, some of the details about how it's applied. But according to the system of laws in the United States, the president could not come in and just get rid of something that the Congress wrote and published. VAWA is something that the Congress did back in the 1990s, back when Congress could get stuff done. And the same with Freddie's question about cancellation of deportation. That was also something that was published back in the 90s. A president under the law in the United States cannot just come in and simply cancel. I'm sorry, I'm switching English to Spanish. They can't just come in and simply cancel something that Congress wrote. Now, that doesn't mean he can't try. Doesn't mean he won't try. And, you know, it's a brave new world in the United States with the Supreme Court saying he's immune and can do all kinds of stuff that he wants to do without consequence. I don't know how much he's going to respect that separation of powers. But at this point, what I can tell you is that if you qualify for VAWA, I think it is worth applying. Under the last Trump administration, the VAWA program continued. Did it become harder to win? Yes. Did it require more documentation to win? Yes. Did that make us, those of us who went through that process, better lawyers? Yes, it did. It's worth applying. VAWA is an excellent program. It is still on the books. It is worth applying if you qualify. Now, there are attorneys out there who are trying to get people to apply for VAWA who actually don't meet the definition of having suffered abuse or extreme cruelty. That I disagree with. But if you have suffered abuse or extreme cruelty at the hands of a U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident who is a family member, then it is worth applying, in my opinion. I am happy to talk with anyone in private about whether their case qualifies for those definitions. So if we can help you with that, please let us help you. It is our honor and privilege to do that. Okay. Otras preguntas. Let's do a few more. My goodness, we have a bunch today. I'm glad to see y'all here. It's nice. It's nice to see my community here in these difficult moments. A ver, hola. Si pido asilo ahora, Trump podría cambiar. Ok. Es posible. Trump definitivamente anteriormente trató de cambiar el programa de asilo. También el presidente Biden ha tratado de cambiar el programa del asilo. Si califica para el asilo, pienso que vale la pena aplicar todavía. Hay que siempre recordar que el asilo es un beneficio súper difícil de ganar. Y ha sido así mucho tiempo, más difícil cada día, me parece, pero también salva vidas. Todavía realmente salva vidas en algunos casos y vale la pena analizar la situación suya con un abogado a ver qué sería la estrategia mejor para su caso en particular. Ok, Eli. En inglés su nombre sería Eli, pero tal vez es Eli en español. A ver, perdón. Trump podrá cambiar el permiso de trabajo de 5 años. Ok, eso sí es un cambio que podemos ver, que quita el tiempo de los permisos de trabajo. Para muchos años anteriormente, los permisos de trabajo del asilo duraban 1 año nada más. Era necesario renovar cada año el permiso de trabajo. Es algo problemático, costoso, porque resulta en lapsos de su permiso de trabajo, es más costoso, es una molestia. Entonces, eso sí es algo que pueda cambiar. Se supone que debería cambiar la regla, no simplemente anunciarlo y cambiarlo de inmediato, sino darnos un poquito de aviso, permitirnos hacer comentarios públicos y luego cambiarlo. No sé si va a pasar rápido o más lento el cambio, pero es un cambio que yo podría ver y anticipar bajo este presidente. Okay, Destiny. What happens if the consular interview goes wrong and the green card is denied? Is there an appeal? And how many years for results? Okay, Destiny, that's a great question. There's really no appeal for a consular case that is denied. Sometimes a waiver may be available to the person. If a person is denied at their consular interview, it's usually because they're found to be inadmissible to the United States. The courts have been really consistent in saying that, like, we don't have a right to sue the State Department for finding a person ineligible for a visa. Once they're outside the United States, the picture about what rights and obligations that person has changes very much according to the laws of whatever country they're in. And they no longer have like a right to be in the United States, according to the courts. And it's very hard for us as attorneys. It's almost impossible really for us to appeal a consular decision. Sometimes if a person is found inadmissible, they are allowed to apply for what's called a waiver of inadmissibility, meaning they can apply for a forgiveness, a pardon, right? And the amount of time it takes varies wildly depending on what kind of case it is. Right now, what we're seeing is those waivers are taking at least a couple of years. I want to emphasize with my clients over the next several years, and I think here also with friends and loved ones on our social media, that it is going to be important to do some worst case scenario planning about the next 4 years, thinking about like what does happen if the consular interview goes off the rails? What does happen to your family if your spouse is not allowed to return legally to the United States? How will you deal with that? What steps will you take? Now is the time to be making those plans and thinking those scenarios through. Now, I know I get really freaked out and scared and overwhelmed thinking about big, scary stuff like that. But now is the time for courage. Think about those things and then focus on just one tiny step that you can take to get prepared. One tiny thing you can do today, one tiny thing you can do tomorrow, one tiny thing you can do next week, next month, to get ready for worst case scenarios. Because based on what we saw last time, there will be some people denied at the consulates. There will be some people deported. There will be some people detained. There will be some people placed in removal proceedings. And a lot of these people will not be people who deserve it at all. Okay, so rather than waiting until that moment arrives and it's really awful and freaky and we're angry and scared and upset and confused, no, we're going to get ready now. And then we can also focus very, very carefully on seeing exactly how the requirements change, evolve, increase, whatever they're going to do, and do our best to comply with them or make strategic decisions according to that information. We will have information. It will be difficult to digest all of it, but we will not give up. Our families are too important. Our loved ones are too important. Our immigrant community is too crucial to the United States, and we're not gonna give up. We're just gonna keep going. I hope that helps, Destiny. I know it's not a super satisfactory answer, but I think that's the reality that we're dealing with. Green Thumb Girl, thank you so much for the for this sweet kindness. I so need it today. You're gonna make me cry. Thank you so much. I'm happy to answer questions. It is my honor. All right. Worried about when it's time to renew. Can I speak with you regarding possibly applying for VAWA? Absolutely, Anthony. So let me have you, if for anything, especially if it deals with any kind of abuse or anything like that, those are the kinds of cases where I can give y'all general information, but we really, really have to protect confidentiality so carefully in cases like that. So please do reach out to us. My website is scrolling across the bottom. Our phone number is scrolling across the bottom. Make a consultation with me or any of the attorneys in my firm so that we can talk in depth and in detail and in confidence with discretion and care about exactly what your case entails and what is the best strategy for you to achieve long-term secure status. That is what you need to do. Is it worth attending the I-131F biometrics appointment? Okay, Aquatic Paradise. I like your online name. This is a great question. Here's my non-direct attorney answer. It depends. If you have a history of removal, if you have a criminal history, if you have any kind of situation in your case where you could become easily a target for deportation in the future, I'd say maybe not. Maybe it's not worth attending because if the I-131F process isn't going to continue at this point, which I really don't think it is, then why submit to biometric identification right now? Now, if I'm wrong and the program does continue, then having had your application filed and your biometrics taken is going to be a huge advantage. So it really depends on your level of comfort with submitting personal identifying information to immigration in this moment. And, you know, I will say that for all the big talk that I've heard about mass deportations and stuff, the reality is that ICE doesn't, first of all, have the resources really to go find every single person in the United States that is without status. And second, economically, it won't work. And the Trump administration is aware of that, right? They're not going to actually be able to go and round up people who aren't putting themselves in the spotlight with ICE. People who do put themselves in the spotlight with ICE by getting arrested or by having had deportations before, those folks are going to be at greater risk of actually getting deported and detained during this administration, if the last administration is any indication of how this is going to go. So aquatic paradise, that's a long answer. I can't say yes or no. It really depends on your personal level of comfort and your kind of optimism about the I-131F program yourself and what you think is going to happen. All right, 2 more questions and then I gotta go. Hola, abogada. ¿Qué pasará con el parol para los esposos de ciudadanos y qué pasará con los permisos de trabajo que ya se dieron? ¿Se cancelarán o seguirán hasta su expiración? Ok. Con el parol depende de qué va a hacer el juez esta semana. Últimamente anticipo yo que el presidente Trump probablemente cancelará el programa del parol para esposos de ciudadanos. No sé 100%, pero me imagino que sí, debido a lo que hizo en su presidencia anterior. Con respecto a los permisos de trabajo, yo anticipo que ellos tendrán validez hasta su fecha de expiración. No sabemos si ellos van a seguir otorgando permisos así de 5 años a la vez o si los van a cortar su tiempo de elegibilidad o si van a cancelar completamente algunos permisos. Realmente no sabemos ahorita qué exactamente va a pasar con todo eso. Debido a lo que pasó la última vez que fue presidente Trump en la Casa Blanca, anticipo que va a cortar el tiempo de elegibilidad de los permisos de trabajo al máximo que puede. Pero si tiene uno de 5 años ahorita, probablemente va a durar hasta su fecha de vencimiento. Es lo que imagino va a pasar. No sé 100%, pero es mi idea ahorita debido a mi experiencia. All right, last question. I like your name. I don't know how to say it, LTLY. Can I be put in removal proceeding if I apply for PIP spouse and it gets canceled? Okay. The answer is technically yes, you could. But it's really important to remember that regardless of all the talk, okay, and I do recommend not spending a bunch of time listening to the talk and the news about like all the scary stuff they're saying. Let's try to really focus on solutions. And in this case, I would say that the likelihood is very low that ICE is going to be targeting people just for applying for things. This is just not within the realm of their resources. They are going to have their hands full, just like this is what we saw before. They will have their hands very full targeting people who are caught up in the criminal justice system because of a DWI or they're pulled over for some other reason. So it's going to be very important for people to get their cars in working order. And in fact, don't drive if you can. I know that's a huge order in the United States. It's really hard to get around without a car in many, many places in the United States. But cars are one of the ways that ICE got people a lot last time. I'm going to be really honest. Pulling people over in cars is one of the main mechanisms for ICE, much more so than going through their own system and looking at who applied for stuff. Because people move, people change addresses, People apply for stuff, but they don't have any kind of criminal record. They're still not really a priority for removal or detention. So it's much easier for ICE to get people through the criminal justice system. And that can happen by people getting pulled over by local police. It can happen by people crossing the border. It can happen by people crossing checkpoints near the border. And if you have a prior deportation and they get wind of you being in the US, they will go look for you at your house. That is what we've seen. I don't think that they will be going after people who've just simply applied for things. I could be wrong. I really hope I'm wrong on that. But I will say if they're going to do that, if they're going to go through the systems that they have where people have applied for benefits in order to try to deport people, very quickly, the courts are going to be incredibly crowded, and your case will take potentially 20 years to get heard because they already take that long as it is. So that's a lot of information. It's a lot of difficult information for me to deliver today. We are not giving up. We are going to keep fighting. We're going to keep fighting for legal pathways. We're going to keep fighting to get your stories out there. Immigrants are some of the strongest, bravest, most self-sacrificing, hardworking people in the United States. We are so lucky to have you guys, all of your strength, all of your determination, all of your commitment, your dream, and your resilience. We are so lucky to have that in the US. We need to get those stories out. We're not going to give up. We're going to keep going. And we're going to keep getting people long-term safe legal status in the US. So thank you so much for being here today. I am going to be with American Families United this afternoon at 5. I mean, not American Families United, sorry, Mixed Status Families United. American Families United is another organization worth investigating if you are in the United States without status. They're doing great work. Mixed Status Families United on Facebook. Look it up if you're not in there already. I'll be there at 5 today. We're going to be talking about extreme hardship waivers this afternoon in that group. So we're going to keep going and we're going to keep working. And it's going to be tough, but we're going to be all right. We'll be together. Thank you for being here with me today. Please let me know if I can help with anything. Contact our office, 512-633-1785. I am going to be happy to talk with people individually about how we can best protect you and your family over the next 4 years. Reach out to us at jlw.law. Schedule an appointment with me or any of my colleagues, and I will see y'all next week. Bye-bye.